What are you holding on to that you no longer truly need? This is a question we can all ask ourselves, and it's one I'm facing into right now in a very practical way as we prepare to move home. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But there's a really powerful metaphor here of what are we holding onto within us that's no longer serving us. Hence the title around freeing up the inner and outer clutter. So, my reflections on this theme began with a conversation with Anton when we were out walking, as so many of these episodes do begin in that way. So, back in the day, when I was relatively early in my career, home computers were really clunky things. And we were just coming out of that dial-up connection and floppy disk drive era. And when they got full, we would free up the RAM. We'd go through this process of cleansing the memory, sitting watching a blue screen with a little dot move along it, and watch it as it tidied up the memory within the computer. And we would have to go through a process of clearing out the stuff that we no longer needed in order that we could make space for the stuff that was yet to come. And my reflection was that these days, of course, we just buy more digital space. We don't do clearing out. I think for many of us, myself included, I think we keep all the stuff and we just keep adding to it. So, if you've ever been prompted by iCloud or Google or Dropbox to increase your digital space, then you might put your hand up and, you might, like me, sort of acknowledge that actually the very tempting thing and the very normal thing is to do what they suggest and to increase that space. So as with all of these podcasts, it is so vital that there is absolutely no judgment here. This is an interesting area to explore, and just looking at the way that we behave around our digital possessions can be an interesting way in to exploring how we are around our other kind of more tangible non-virtual possessions. And of course that then leads into a number of metaphors, and I'll explore those as we go, as we kind of meander, as is our way, through this topic. Because of course, this idea of, just holding on to stuff, we do it with things as well. And, there's been a huge upsurge in, people using these storage units. So according to one report I read, Americans are going to spend over $37.5 billion this year on storage. And of course there are, there's lots of popularity around programs like Storage Hunters, and I think there's some others as well, that really sort of help cement the normality of having a storage unit into our, sort of cultural experience. So rather than clear things out, we perhaps find ourselves simply buying more space to store the things we own, and then we keep on adding to them. And in terms of this sort of clutter, this idea of sort of clutter being something that, we just hold on to stuff that surrounds us. there can also be a financial impact as well. So there's there's a sort of interesting take on this from a woman that I've come across called Anne Zanon, who's a professional organizer, a bit like Marie Kondo in the States, who calculates the cost of space per square foot. And in one of the examples, she talks about a 2,000 square foot home that perhaps costs $300,000. And by her calculations, that means that the average family typically spends about $15 a year for each square foot of house. And as she says, it doesn't sound like a lot, but that could be $15 a year to keep a toy that your child isn't playing with, for example. Now, I don't know how she did her calculations, but if we imagine that she's correct, it's a really interesting observation how we're kind of investing hard-earned money in creating space for things that actually we perhaps don't need. Maybe they're not really serving a need anymore. So I reference Marie Kondo, and if you've ever seen any of her YouTube or sort of TV shows, etc., then you'll know that one of her maxims is keep only those things that spark joy, and that's a beautiful way of being able to do a kind of assessment of what we have around us. And of course, the renowned designer William Morris, he famously said, "Have nothing in your home that you do not know to be useful or believe to be beautiful." And for me, that is just such a powerful way of assessing whether or not something should stay or should go. Although I'll talk a little bit more about my own sort of practices in a bit. So we have this opportunity these days to simply add to the digital stuff and the tangible stuff, just to keep expanding the space that we're inhabiting, rather than perhaps choosing to clear things out and make space. And my sense is that this desire to hold onto things gets entangled with our egoic desire for permanence. So by not letting go of stuff, we resist the idea of our own impermanence. And, that may be a lovely topic, actually. Something to explore another time on the podcast is sort of what it is about our own impermanence that we find so challenging to face into. And there are lots of incredible spiritual teachers with lots of wisdom on that we could explore. But staying with this idea of the stuff, the digital, the tangible, and the emotional stuff that we carry, my reflection is that holding on to this stuff also takes up space in our own heads too, or RAM in our own heads. Can actually, I have a sense that there may well be part of my brain, at least, that has a constant awareness of where things are. And I think when we look at the way that the brain helps us find our way, through a geography, we build maps in our heads of, a street so that we know the way to walk, and in exactly the same way, or a mountain range even, so that we know the path through the mountain. We build a virtual map in our head in exactly the same way that in our home, I expect, and I'm very happy to be challenged on this, but I expect we build a virtual map of where everything is. And it's what enables us to get up in the middle of the night in the dark and go and have a wee without bumping into things. So, what's the impact of that? And my sense is that some of that space could perhaps be freed up in order to create a bit of space or to be used even more effectively. So, something that comes to mind here is I have a pair of sapphire earrings. One of them is damaged, and I had a vague attempt at getting it fixed a few years ago. So it shows you it is literally a few years ago. It shows you how long this has been going on. And I know now that there is a part of my brain that is constantly alert about where those earrings are. Every time I think of them, I have this mild panic of like, oh, what have I done with them? Where are they? And a memory that I need to get them fixed because they're really special to me. They're beautiful, they're valuable, and they're really meaningful. So they were a gift from Anton. But at the same time, they're not something that I've been motivated enough to get fixed because they're not something that I'd now wear. So that bit of my brain that's taken up with knowing where they are and knowing that the broken one needs to be fixed is like a constant drain on my headspace, and it can't be used for something more useful. And of course, the answer here is just get it done and then put them away safely in my jewelry box and clear that space in my head, which, having just talked this all through, I think I might have just inspired myself to do. And my throat's gone a bit croaky. Just one second. So, why do we hold onto all of this stuff? From a psychological perspective, more than mere tools, luxuries, or junk, our possessions become extensions of the self. We use them to signal to ourselves and others who we want to be and where we want to belong. And in many ways, long after we're gone, they can be seen to become our legacy. So if there's something that we've created or something that we've owned. And they can feel like they provide us with a form of protection, like an adjunct to ourselves that reflects who we really are or how we wish to be seen. And in his book, How Pleasure Works, Paul Bloom talks of the essence of things, how we can imbue objects with our essence or perceive them to be imbued with the essence of someone we love or someone we respect or someone we fear. And if you just allow your mind to sort of skirt over the things in your home that are important to you or the things that you would not wish to have in your home, then, I'm sure you can see how that idea of the essence of the person comes in. For myself, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see behind me there's a set of shelves. And on there are a number of objects which, for me, are imbued with the essence of my son, the essence of my mother, the essence of other family members, the essence of my relationship with my husband. So those objects become even more important. They stop being a pair of tiny little shoes, my son's first shoes, and they start to become something which is inextricably linked with my love of him. So this attraction to things, to the essence they hold, to the protection they can seem to provide, can mean that when we have an empty space, we tend to fill it. And that brings us back to this idea of, never letting anything go, simply filling up the space around us. And as the space expands, as we get the storage, we fill that too. So In design, when I was doing marketing, which is my previous career, we always talked about the power of the white space, which is the space around the thing that you're trying to promote. It's what gives the message its power. And too much clutter on the page and things become indecipherable. Just as, of course, and this is where the inner metaphor comes in, too much clutter in our heads and our thoughts become indecipherable too. So we use language like, oh, my head's too full, or I really need a clear head for this. And and in the same way, actually pain, so physical as well as emotional pain, takes up space in our heads too. So it's interesting how, a number of things can collide or can combine to help us or to make us feel as though our head is just too full. And just on that point around pain, around physical pain, if you follow my gratitude posts on at 21 Beads of Gratitude on Instagram, or you might read them on Facebook if we're connected on Facebook, you'll see I've had an issue with my left arm for the past 6 months. And it began with nerves trapped in my neck and then revealed an issue with my rotator cuff. And it has been sometimes random and sometimes highly targeted and often excruciating pain. And it is on the mend, though I still can't get dressed myself each day. And which is which is an interesting exploration of letting go in itself, because there is no room for ego when you are standing naked in a camper van asking your partner to help you pull up your pants and do up your bra. And it sounds vaguely amusing, and it was quite funny when we were away on holiday to find myself doing that. But it's also been a really sobering reflection on how much we take our mobility for granted. And I feel that is a whole other topic in itself, actually. Again, and perhaps another topic for the podcast around gratitude for the mobility that we have. Anyway, back to this idea of pain and the space that it takes up in us. I've noticed over the summer that even when my arm hasn't been actively painful, it's tired me out. Just knowing that I'm having to be careful about it and not move it in certain ways. And that space that it's been taking up in my head, just like those sapphire earrings, can't then be used for something else, something that's more useful. Now, clearly, I don't have a choice around this pain that I'm feeling. But we can make choices about other things that we're carrying around with us. And also I can make a choice here about the way that I respond to this pain, whether I add to the space that it's taking up with emotional stories around it, or I create some spaciousness around it. So the question here is, what if we choicefully create space in our lives, in our heads, in our hearts, where we can? In Zen Buddhism, there is a direct call for simplicity. And one of the 4 main pillars of Zen Buddhism is the recognition of attachment as a source of suffering. And this is a concept that I have struggled with and now have come to be endlessly curious about, because that attachment as a source of suffering, so that attachment could be to people, to places, to things, or to thoughts. And it's the things and the thoughts that I'm really focusing on today. And for me, meditation has been about creating that space, helping to create or helping to detach from thoughts specifically. So, giving myself the room to breathe freely, for my thoughts to float through and not get caught on other thoughts. And the regular practice of meditation is what helps me and millions of others help keep that space, that internal space, clear. And of course, that Zen principle is the foundation of Feng Shui, which is the way of organizing a clutter-free space to optimize the flow of good energy. And that in itself can be an act of meditation. And I'm sure I referenced Marie Kondo earlier. I'm sure, Feng Shui will be sitting very much at the heart of the approach that she has too. So, so something here, this is like a bit of a confession. There's part of me that is very reluctant to share this, which makes it feel even more important to share it. Extending this metaphor of things and thoughts, I have a messy corner in my bedroom. It is a chair, and on that chair there is a pile of clothes. And in fact, as I'm saying it, there is a pile of clothes on it right now. It's things that I take off, so maybe like a jumper or a pair of jeans that I take off that I'm going to wear again, and I don't hang them up or I don't put them in the drawer. Or it might be a pile of clean clothes that have all just been sort of washed and dried and put on the chair, and I haven't put them away, and then the whole thing gets a bit muddled. And I end up with what I now refer to as chair blindness. So after a while, I just stop seeing everything that's on the chair, and I blank it. It's like there's a kind of veil comes down. It's oh, it's funny just even sort of thinking about reflecting on what it is that's actually going on there. But when the chair is clear, I feel so much calmer, and the room is so lovely to be in. But gradually, the stuff piles up again, and then my brain blocks out the mess again, and I don't deal with it until eventually I have a tidy, and then I'm so grateful again. So it's this cyclical process that I notice, and every time I notice it, I think, oh, this is very curious. To bring some more observation to this, and one day I'll resolve it, and there won't be a messy chair in my room anymore. But the metaphor that arises for me about my messy chair that I just blank out, where I get this sort of chair blindness, is that I could see it almost like a kind of shadow part, a part that sits in the corner. Maybe piled on top of it is some fear, some anxiety, some worries about something. That I then blank out, I suppress, I learn to ignore or skirt around. But the thing here is that it's still there. The chair with all the stuff on it is still there. It doesn't matter whether or not I choose to see it. That doesn't change anything. And I think the important thing here is that just as clearing out tangible stuff can make us feel clearer and less cluttered in our physical environment, so can clearing out the old narratives and stories and limiting beliefs that we're sort of carrying inside us. Clearing those out can then declutter our emotional environment and make us feel clearer and calmer and more able to deal with life as it really is, without all of that stuff obscuring our view. So there's something here as well around the importance of creating space. So in coaching, I will often say to my clients that, when I say often, I think pretty much always, that the time between the sessions is as important as the time we spend together. That's the white space. The time between the sessions is the white space. It's the clear space where ideas can percolate. And it's where the subconscious can do her or his work and things can fall into place. So it's this space that we create in coaching that helps us see where we are holding on to our internal baggage too. So this whole reflection today was inspired. I said at the start of this episode, it was inspired by the experience that we're having now of moving house. So we haven't yet got an exchange date or anything like that, but we're in the process. The process is flowing around us. And we are really mindful of the stuff that we own. Our house that we're moving to is almost half the size of where we live now. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll have a sense of the size of this house because I'm sitting in my study upstairs right now. And we've lived here for 20 years. So we've got a lot of stuff. And we've got big furniture to fit the size of the rooms. And all of our furniture and all of our things right now, they work proportionally with this house. But they really are not going to work with where we're going to. So that's been taking up some headspace for me over the summer, a bit like a game of Tetris, trying to work out where the things can go in the new house. And then I had the glorious realization, which is blindingly obvious, of course, is that it's not about the stuff. This is about choosing how do we want to live. It's not about making sure we can fit all of our stuff into the place where we live. And we had a really good piece of advice from a couple of friends of ours, Richard and Kirk, who told us, don't move all of the stuff into the house straight away. Leave it in boxes, stick it in a shed, stick it in a garage, whatever it might be. And we're lucky we've got a small barn and a little stable in the place where we're going to, where we can store some stuff. And the idea being that if we don't empty out those boxes, if we don't bring all of those things into the house over the next, say, 6 months, then it's a pretty good indicator that not all of it, at least, do we need to keep. And maybe it goes on to somebody else's home where for them it is of benefit. It is something which brings them the spark of joy. It is something which they believe to be beautiful or know to be useful. This isn't about chucking things into landfill. This is about recycling and repurposing. But this idea of being really choiceful about what we bring into the house, I really love this as a metaphor for when we make a change in our lives. We don't have to simply bring everything with us. And in fact, I've got there are a couple of clients I'm working with at the moment where this theme has come up quite strongly, where for both of them, they've shifted into new jobs or are about to shift into new jobs. And so a big part of their work at the moment is working out what are the behaviors, habits, beliefs that they want to bring with them from their old job into their new job. And, they're approaching this in a very choiceful way in order to understand where the temptation might be to hang on to some old habits, maybe some old working patterns, some old beliefs around, how hierarchy works in an organization or whatever the thing might be. And and what they want to be bringing into their new role, into the way of working that they're choosing to create for themselves right now. And as my beautiful friend Susan McCully, who, if you're a regular listener to the podcast, will know that she and I often do beautiful, long conversations with each other, exploring really deep and expansive topics. She said in a recent podcast episode that we all have a choice about what we put in our own backpack. So if we see that as our kind of metaphorical backpack, and we have a choice about when we can put it down as well. So on the brink of making a change, a personal change, is a beautiful time for having a clear out of the things that we no longer need, whether it's those tangible objects or it's the intangible, emotional, behavioral belief stuff. And it doesn't mean that these things didn't once hold value for you, or that you were in any way foolish for having these beliefs or owning these objects. It simply means that while they may have once held value for us, and they once were of benefit to us in some way, in whatever way, we don't necessarily need to keep carrying them all around. We don't have to hold on to everything, constantly take it with us through each part of our life journey to each house that we ever live in. We can choose to respectfully, gently, kindly detach and let things go. So rather than being endlessly distracted by the stuff we might otherwise have tried to squeeze into this new house that we're moving to, well, new, I say new, it's very old. We are creating our new home as a clear space where we feel and think and breathe freely. So if this topic has resonated with you, if you're seeking support in identifying and sorting through your own old stories or beliefs or behaviors that you carry, and you're looking to create a bit more emotional or psychological space for yourself in order to perhaps make room for what you're choosing to draw in, then get in touch. I would love to talk with you, and you can just email me, henny@hennyflynn.co.uk. Thank you so much for being with me today. I've really enjoyed this exploration, and I hope the meandering thoughts have all connected for you in the way that they have for me. And I look forward to seeing you at our next episode next Sunday. And if you're interested in the psychology of things, then I've included a really interesting article on how our relationship with objects develops from birth and how it stays with us and continues to develop and change as we age. So I've included the link to that in the show notes. Okay. Take care. Be safe. And I send you a hug and a wave.